Big Ten basketball this year had 8 qualifiers for the tournament. If you've heard Dick Girardi and I say this once, you probably heard us say it 20 times over the past year, that we thought the Big Ten was good, not great. Now, in this particular year, they're the number 2 conference to the SEC, which was great. And in terms of units, acquired, the SEC is going to end up with 35. The Big Ten is going to be second with 21, right? Essentially, because of the 6-year deal, they end up being about $2 million a unit. So in other words, when Penn State was in as I pointed out to people many times, when Penn State was in the tournament 2 years ago, they earned the Big Ten about $4.2 million. Right? Well, yeah, but I know everybody's against the program. I got it. Okay. Here. Take a business class. Okay, so just one. Okay.
Economics used to be required. Back in the day it was.
Take a business class. I know you love your sport. Just take one business class.
That goes hand in hand with sports.
I know you love.
You ever hear of John Oran?
I know.
It goes together with sports.
I know you love your sport, whatever it happens to be. But in order to understand the big picture, okay, there's a big picture here.
It goes hand in hand.
Okay, there's a big picture.
Scott Docterman, by the way, one of the veteran writers.
Oh, Scott's a great guy.
Yeah, former Hawkeye beat writer.
Yep.
Just an absolute great guy.
So what he did was he sat back and he did a lot of research on where the Big Ten is and where they need to go. In the 15 years before Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, Big Ten programs assigned just 7 top 10 prospects based on composite rankings. Now, that's 15 years. Now, yeah. Rutgers, because of chemistry problems, and look, no offense, the other 11 players in that roster, there are some that are good, and most aren't. There are a couple guys on that team, besides Bailey and Harper, I think are good players.
Yeah, just not enough, yeah.
But they only have a couple of other players besides Bailey and Harper that were good players. I mean, really, like, Penn State should have beaten them twice. Not just once. They should have beaten them twice. Here's the other part. Chicago and Minneapolis, St. Paul produced 8 top 10 players over that span. Not one picked a Big Ten school. Remember, for years, what was the pipeline? Chicago to Champaign, absolutely. Chicago to Champaign. Minneapolis, St. Paul, they don't stay home. In fact, one of the biggest problems Minnesota has had as a basketball program is check the starting lineup out for Wisconsin. And don't just look at like names and heights and class. Look at the hometowns. There's a lot of Minnesota players on the Wisconsin roster. I mean, at least over the years, that's the way it's been. 2025 class. The Big Ten has just 2 5-star signees. Shooting guard Elijah Aarons, right? He's going to go to USC. And Michigan combo guard Trey McKinney. Aarons is number 7 in the composite, and McKinney is 17. They're the Big Ten's only incoming freshmen ranked in the top 30. Duke and Houston have combined for 7 top 25 recruits. Arizona, UConn, Arkansas, Louisville have 2 apiece. Now, one of them for UConn, by the way, is the Indiana Player of the Year. It probably would have helped if the head coach for Indiana showed up more than once. I will leave it at that, not mentioning names. 2 of the top 4 transfers have landed in the Big Ten. Bennett Sturts to Iowa following his coach, Donovan Dent, the point guard from New Mexico, going to UCLA. But Purdue and Michigan State are built on what? Homegrown talent. Michigan State had 4 starters, homegrown. Purdue had all 5. They were 1 and 2 in the Sweet 16 in homegrown talent. Purdue last year added exactly no transfers. Not one player in their roster last year was a transfer. Okay? Michigan State had 2 transfers. right? Both played, by the way. Both play. And Fiddler, in fact, I thought played pretty well for them. Okay? But they were there they weren't starters. They were there to fill gaps. Now, Trey Holloman's put his name into the transfer portal. I was a bit surprised by that.
Same.
Xavier Booker put his name in. I expected that because he had really fallen with the emergence of a couple of guys, Kohler, Cooper, and most especially Cohen Carr. Now, you knew Carr was going to play, but this is where I give Carr a lot of credit and I give Michigan State a lot of credit. A year ago, he was a dunker. Okay? And I'm talking spectacular. But that's what he was. This year, he's a basketball player. You look at his ability. He obviously worked really hard on his shot in the offseason. He has now become a rather competent three-point shooter. He's become a guy that was in the 30s at the free throw line. Was at 70% this year at the free throw line. He obviously worked his backside off to become a better shooter. All credit to Cohen Carr. As Painter told everybody at the press conference, we've just stayed the same path as we have before. Now, when he's talking about bringing in top talent, Caden Mingo, by the way, is a top 50 guy. I mean, he's coming into the Big Ten. He's going to Penn State. What's Mingo, 47? Something like that. Yeah. Right. Now, Purdue was the conference's only team to rank in the top 12 in offensive efficiency, but it was 300th in possessions per 40 minutes. And these are all things. Dick did a great job when this first came out, the KenPom rankings. Right? He said, "Steve, you ought to take a look at this," and he'd send it to me, and like, wow, like breaking down everything. Dick was the first analyst in the country to really, no question in my mind, he's the first analyst in the country that was breaking down the numbers based on the KenPom numbers. Then he got me introduced to it. Now we talk about it, and selectively, but we'll talk about points per possession. We'll talk about, we've always talked about how many possessions were left in a game. We've always done that. But who's a quick-paced team, who's not a quick-paced team, all these things that we've talked about. So when Penn State played Purdue, we talked about their offensive efficiency is usually good, but they're not a fast-paced team. And Penn State sped them up and ran them out back in December. But Dick is the one that got me going on that. I did not know really anything about that until he introduced it to me, and now it's part of the routine and regimen I use to get ready for games. Doesn't mean we're going to use it every time. There's a lot of information that you have in front of you don't use, but it's there in case you need it, right? And Dick's the one that got me going on that part of it. The NBA issues warnings to Ja Morant and Buddy Hield over hand gestures, but there'll be no discipline. That's great. Did anybody see it? No, nobody saw it. Nobody watches Sports Center anymore. No, okay, good.
No.
Tom Izzo said, "When I came into this league, winning the Big Ten championship was the greatest thing in the world because you grind through 20 games. That's a grind. You can win 3 games in the Big Ten tournament and get lucky. You can win 4 games and get to a Final Four. It's impressive. But it's not like the grind of 20 games that we've just done playing. People, unfortunately, think we barely play basketball until the end of March." Okay? I'll get to that in a moment because that's a great statement. The road to a league title and ultimately NCAA success, he writes, is much more difficult now, as how many times have I pointed out? When the West Coast people came in, okay, everybody's job in the Big Ten got more difficult. When the West Coast people came in, their jobs got more difficult. Eric Musselman has proposed that the league should examine 3-game road trips like the NBA. Now, this, I mean, I don't know. I don't know about that. Like, for example, where do you play your 3 games in a row? That's the question. Other coaches have suggested more travel during a school's winter break, starting league action as early or shortening the mandated scheduling principle of 2 preparation days to 1. Now, the latter part's the one I'm in favor of. It made 0 sense to me other than garnering Marriott points to play on a Saturday at UCLA and then to play at USC on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
When that came out in September, I mean, because we already knew that Penn State was playing at UCLA and at USC. We already knew that. Just a question of when it was going to be. And it turned out to be Super Bowl Sunday weekend. I assumed it would. I shouldn't say assumed. I guessed. My guess was, you know what? They'll play like Thursday, Saturday, or they'll play Saturday, Monday. And then it came out, and Penn State's playing Saturday, Tuesday. Well, it turned out like all those trips were spread out with 2 days off in between. That made no sense. And I talked to Mike Rhodes about this. Mike says we should not be sitting out here. Now, Super Bowl Sunday, he took them over to the Intuit Dome, and Penn State practiced at the brand new Clippers Arena.